Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So today is Monday, so once again we are going to be working in my sketchbook. So I do have like this little sketch of Danheng, but because I'm not going to be working on this one today, I'm just going to stick a little sheet of paper in between to kind of protect it. And we'll just move on to the next spread over. So because we are nearing the end of the sketchbook, my pages, or like the distribution of pages in my sketchbook, is kind of uneven. So to make sure that it lays more flat and flushed, I ended up putting this little coaster underneath just to kind of even it out while we start to sketch a little bit. And kind of like the plan for today, because I don't know. I like working with traditional medium, but I've been mostly painting and doing watercolor more recently. Other than that, I'd be working like on digital things, but I didn't really feel any of my other traditional mediums for like drawing or sketching. But there is one medium, but I feel like I haven't like dabbled in as much. I did briefly do like one little spread in the sketchbook where I drew, I think, Kaelix debonair from Niji En, and I ended up doing that little illustration with colored pencils, so that is what we are going to be doing today. As for characters, I think it's going to be a little bit more obvious from the thumbnail and if you've been keeping up with previous videos. So this is my new OC Selwin, and I just had the urge to draw him because of his kind of like the color combination that I wanted to try to work with today, fit his color palette for the most part. So I wanted something that was more blue and yellow focused, and ended up just drawing him with a bunch of stars. And I think if you watched, I think it was like the last live stream that I did, I talked a little bit about still not being 100% on like Selwyn's design per se. So there are gonna be like small tweaks here and there. I'm still debating on like buttons or accessories, pins, or anything like that for his sweater, or even like near the belt area. Kind of will change, but I do think that one thing I want to include, especially like when I'm drawing him digitally, is that I want to make the little sparkle star design type things that are near his glasses. He has like one for his piercing as well. I kind of want them to have like a slight glow to them. I think could be fun to do. So that's kind of like what made me want to do a little bit more of like, you're gonna see like a very bright yellow that I'm gonna be using for this particular piece, because I wanted the little stars to also have that glow, and I thought it'd be cute to add that detail to his glasses too. So like future illustrations probably will include that. It was this kind of experimental right here. In terms of talking about process, almost every traditional medium that requires me to color on top of my sketch at some point, I like using the palette Color ENO, typically in red if I'm drawing a lot of characters, just because it just matches usually better with their skin tone and it doesn't really look too weird. Otherwise, like if I use like my photo blue or my darker blue, having those small little pops of a cooler tone on the skin sometimes throws things off. Obviously it will depend on your color palette, so just use whatever suits it, but red is kind of like a safer color, or even like pink at this point. So starting off with the red palette Color ENO, we're just sketching out Selwyn. I allowed the piece to kind of spill over the entire spread. I will end up doing one more little doodle in the top right hand corner just to fill out the space, but this is kind of like our main focus for today. So I've had this idea for a little bit. I was gonna do it for like a digital illustration, hence if you watched the last live stream that I did, I think the angle and low-key the pose, other than his hand being up, is very similar. But let's kind of roll it back to talking about the process again. So for the lines, because I don't like doing line art before doing the coloring, and I don't really want to do darker lines with graphite because it tends to smudge a lot, I end up just taking a kneaded eraser and going over our sketch to lighten everything up so that the red is not too jarring to the entire thing, and it just keeps things a little bit cleaner if you're working with any type of like lighter colors, or you just don't want the red to show up at any point. I am using the Arrtx colored pencils just because they have like a plethora of colors, and it's kind of like my main set that I use. Unless I really want to do super heavy blending, I will just mix them along with my Prismacolor primer set as well. So to kind of get ready for our little coloring session, I do pre-pick a lot of the colors beforehand, so there's a little bit less of gaps in between like choosing colors, and then I just pre-sharpen them. So I usually keep like a little ricotta cheese tub with my sharpener so that catches all the pencil shavings, and then I can dump that out later at some point. But for now, we're starting off with the skin and the face, as I typically do for probably every medium that I choose to do any coloring. And we're just going to slowly build up value and add warmth to his face. I think for the most part, my biggest reasoning of like wanting to work with colored pencils is that I wanted to do something that had some sort of like pop of color, but I was not really into like painting in my sketchbook per se. So one, gouache was kind of out of the question. I felt too rusty to sacrifice the amount of time that I wanted to work on something for a spread. Watercolor, I was not willing to warp the paper because I wanted to do something else for the down-home page, which now with like hindsight, it's kind of stupid just because I end up just sketching a bunch of poses and stuff, which wasn't really like detrimental if like there was warping. But I settled with colored pencils kind of for like the same reason that I didn't want to use the watercolors. I didn't end up using markers as well, even though like water-based markers probably would have been okay. But I wanted to prevent myself from doing anything that required me to do heavy inking at some point, because I didn't want to give myself like that arthritis carpal tunnel feeling, which I usually get if I have like a death grip and doing like line work or inking. I tend to put more of that pressure on my hand. So colored pencil is the same, like the right way to go for now. I just thought it'll be more of like a chill session. It was easier for me to just build up color, and if I could, like, I could just make the lines really pop and make all the colors very fainted, or I could just really push the colors as much as I could and see how it kind of goes at the very end. But for coloring, I do make sure that while I'm doing the coloring for, let's say, his skin tone at first, I try to block in shadows fairly quickly to kind of like determine the shape of anything else that's interacting with it. So like some other mediums, let's say watercolors, gouache, even alcohol markers, I often let the skin tone kind of bleed. And as long as I have some structure to be able to see my lines still, I don't really mind if the colors kind of like blend and mingle. But for the colored pencils and me having such faint lines, I don't accidentally want to meld those areas together too quickly without defining them. So as you can see, I'm still leaving the skin tone fairly light, but I used kind of like a pink or like a darker peach color to really define where the shadows for the hair were initially, so that I could quickly block in with a light pass of like a little bit of yellow for where the star is glowing, and then a light pass of blue so that we can see where the hair is. And then later on, I'll like slowly build up again the value for the skin, and then we can outline the hair and just keep them like nice and separate. I think like out of all my OCs currently, during like the month of August, I've definitely drawn Selwin the most. Granted, like because he's such a new character, I just wanted to get used to drawing him in general. But for this piece, I did have to open up my reference on my phone because I totally forgot what his eye color was, or like if I had more of a separation between his sweater color and his hair color, which here you won't really see it as much other than me pushing the values more in his hair and leaving the sweater a little bit lighter. But when I did, I think the painting that I did for him of like a watercolor piece, I did end up making his sweater a little bit more greeny blue rather than like the purpley indigo ultramarine color that I ended up with his hair, just to kind of give a better separation. But it's also like my own bias because I like adding more of like a greeny blue if it's associated more with like yellow or orange or red, and knowing like his little ribbon or tie at the very top of his, like where it is at his collar, it's gonna be more of like an orangey red. So I feel like with the kind of more green blue color, it would fit just a smidge better than just having it be the same color as his hair. So while I was coloring, the color that I ended up using for the star and like the glowing parts in like the Selwin piece in general, as well as like the hair highlights, a little bit in the eyes, on his skin, anywhere else that like kind of catches the light from the glowing. It's hard to see it on camera, and I wish there was a way for me to capture it because like even my phone doesn't really show it. But imagine the yellow highlighter, if it's like very typical in just like general school use, but that as a pencil. That's how vibrant this yellow is, and it's not being done justice via my camera, but it's like perfect for kind of like that fluorescent kind of glowing color, which I really like. I think Arrtx, like this particular pencil set, does have another one, but it's like a fluorescent pink, but that one's like more, I don't know if the lead's just like harder. It's very scratchy and not very smooth, so I like using this one a lot more, and it just fit in terms of like making the things on the page really pop. But I do think like starting in September, I'm gonna really see, and I'm gonna try to solidify both Selwin's design, not both, I guess like Selwin's design, Arrtx, and Anka's design. So those two, Anka and Arrtx, are Akemi siblings. I kind of want to knock all their kind of like sketch page reference sheets out of the way. I think in the future, like literally a year from now, or like whenever Art Fight is again sometime next year, I do want to include them into kind of like my character roster. I'm glad a lot of you actually enjoy Selwin. And I got a few people asking whether or not Selwin will be kind of like part of Art Fight next year. And I think definitely he will be part of it as long as I'm able to get a reference sheet out. And I'm not really into like leaving the reference sheet for last minute. I think I got lucky because this year when I decided to kind of like join Art Fight, kind of last minute-ish, I think it might have been like a month before the event actually started, I already had like pretty much all of my OCs at the time with their reference sheets already finished, which is kind of great. I've also had like their little flower illustrations. I had like the little Pokemon AU chibi version as well. So like pretty much all of my OCs had some kind of consistent look to them. So I need to catch these guys up a little bit. Someone has a little bit more of like artwork already done for him because of his outfit and design are a little bit more solidified. I'm still juggling with the idea of maybe I will continue to fix Arrtx a little bit more. I think Anka is actually pretty okay where she's at. I just need to draw her more and just like figure out whether or not there's any other details that I want to include. But Arrtx, I'm still kind of on the fence about his hair. And his outfit's like very simple. I want to see if like there's something else that I can add to him that makes him a little bit more uniquely, not just like your plain office worker, even though that's what exactly he is. Yeah, enough about them. A little bit about the coloring process. So I just love adding other colors into other areas. And one thing I love about just Selwin in general for his design. Oh, also, maybe I should talk about this first. If you're not familiar with Selwin, I usually give kind of like a little purpose to each of my OCs in a sense. So like Masaki was to force me to draw more foliage and flowers. I had Sato because I had no like female character and I wanted to draw more like dessert themed items. A girl with like a longer hair, or not a girl, a character with longer hair. So it's like, you know, it could have been anything at that point. And then like other of my OCs had like different purposes. I think for the most part, Moriko as well as Kaisen were definitely just more like spur of the moment. I wanted to give Sato a friend, and then I wanted to give Kaisen a friend as well, so that's kind of like their purpose for the most part. But for Selwin, his is much more selfish of a reason, is that I just wanted a character that's like my ultimate comfort character in terms of like combining all of my favorite things that I like to draw. So color palette wise, definitely more up my alley in terms of like the color choices. There are some things like I was a little bit hesitant about, like his pants color and like the tie or whatever, it being more of like a brick red terracotta-ish color alongside with this blue is like a combination I don't do too often. But there's like a lot of colors I could have leaned into, but they would have been too similar to, let's say, Masaki or even like Kaisen at this point. But one thing I really like about Selwin's design is that I get to play around with a lot of the colors, either in the white parts of his like clothing, as well as like the very neutral, kind of slightly earthier tone of his cardigan. So I was able to bleed in some of the blue and purples into the shadows, and it just makes things look a little bit more vibrant and like less dull if I can add in other colors. I know like it doesn't have to be like the character's design for you to do that, but I find it a little bit easier sometimes if it's like lighter, slightly more neutral leaning colors for me to do that. Like if they have more of like a light blue shirt, I'll be a little bit hesitant adding certain colors. But if someone's clothing is like maybe a light gray or like a very light tan or just white, I feel more comfortable being able to like play around and push the colors a lot more. But that's probably just like personal preference at this point. So to kind of finish up the larger Selwin piece, I ended up just doing a quick little glowy border around him and switched over to doing like a little small doodle. I ended up not sketching with that fluorescent color. I'll add it in a little bit later as like a little backdrop for him. But I ended up using like a golden yellow, and then we will use like a softer-ish blue to kind of do our line art and to shade a little bit. And I forgot how much I love just using two colors to just sketch and doodle. It's just simple and it just looks very... I don't know how to explain it. There's like a certain feeling that I really like about just like a two-toned colored doodle. It's been a while. I think the last time I've done this, I even used like 3 colors. But this kind of like blue and yellow is just kind of fun. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one, even though it's a little bit derpy. His eyes are once again like slightly askewed, because I have that problem where sometimes I want the character's head to be tilted, and then I draw the face like more front facing, so their eyes no longer match the angle of their face. So yeah, it's kind of like the same thing that happened to Selwin, but I still really like this doodle. Ended up just shading a lot more with the yellow, and then shading very lightly with like slightly more of like a hatching motion for the blue, just to make sure that it's kind of on the lighter side so that I don't lose my line art color too much. I'll just use the yellow to add in more of the shadows, his patterning, and then I'll switch to that highlighter-ish yellow again and kind of like scribble in a little rectangle-ish kind of background for him. It just makes everything pop, and kind of with the golden color, you can kind of see how vibrant that yellow is actually. Still not like really fluorescent in the camera, but still very bright compared to this more like golden, darker yellow kind of color. Yeah, but I think that's it for today's little sketching drawing session with colored pencils. I definitely enjoy still doing this method of doing like my lines with the colored pencil, but maybe in the future I'll do one where I'll focus maybe on line art first and then we can color it in like afterwards. But hopefully you guys enjoyed watching me just do this little session today. Maybe I'll do more like doodling ones, like similar to the blue and yellow doodle in the top right. But other than that, I think that's it for today's little sketchbook session for today's, or like Monday's video, I guess. And yeah, I'll end up like finishing the Dan Heng sketch a little bit later and finishing off that spread as well. Hopefully we'll finish the sketchbook soon. But for now, I'll talk to you guys next time in the next video. Bye!